Hello, welcome back to Too Sweet MTG, and welcome to part 2 of our cube set review for Wilds of Eldraine. In the last episode, we went over white, blue, and black. In today's episode, we're going to be going over red, green, multicolor, colorless, and lands. If you haven't seen episode 1, links will be available down in the description below. And for those unaware, this recording is taken from our podcast, Powerful Nothing. If you want to listen to these set reviews early, do go and check it out. Links to that will also be down in the description below. But with that, let's take it away with our first red card with Decadent Dragon. Ooh, I love that. Right, it is 2 red for a 4/4 creature dragon with flying, trample, and whenever it attacks, create a treasure token. It also has a adventure. Expensive Taste is 2 and a black for an instant. Exile the top 2 cards of target opponent's library face down. You may look at and play those cards for as long as they remained exiled. So, similar to the twins we mentioned earlier, this is a perfectly fine body. Like I don't actually think mono red at all is excited by a 4/4 body, but like any kind of slower based red decks, it is a solid bit of beef. It will slowly chip away an opponent. Like your opponent will have to deal with a 4/4 flying trampler. That is also making you additional value in the treasure tokens every turn because this is just going to continue beating down while it's in play. The adventure is kind of like Siphon Insight, which is a Dimir spell. Does a similar effect, but you only got to do it. But with that, I think that had flashback. I actually really liked Siphon Insight. I thought it was a very cool card. The ability to play cards from your opponent's deck is stronger than you think in Cube because there shouldn't really be any bad cards. With this, I think you do need to be able to play both halves because with the Expensive Taste, you can cast the cards you've stolen from your opponents, but you still have to pay the mana requirements for them. Like you don't get a freebie in terms of casting them. Like if you take a green card from them, you have to cast it with green. So that's in theory where the treasure from the Decadent Dragon comes in. So that effectively boils down to this is actually, the more I think about it, a Rakdos card, which is a bit of a harder sell, if I'm honest. I'm not sure. Like again, I think these split cards are better when kind of they both work independently of each other and both work together. I don't think the more I think about it, because you can't spend any mana, the black part doesn't work as well as I want it to. So then you are just left with like we're in a world where I'm complaining about a 4/4 flying trample that makes you a treasure token when it attacks.
Welcome to 2023.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, am I wrong, James? Am I losing my mind a bit there?
No, I kind of agree with you. And it's also right even if you're in Rakdos and you take a turn off to play the black's part, and then you cast your dragon. And they just kill the dragon, and you've exiled a green card, and you can't cast it. So obviously, like, is good with other treasure tokens. Is I think part of it. I'd also say you shouldn't yes, you probably don't want to play this as just a mono red card because there are better 4-drops out there for you. But I wouldn't get attached to the casting the adventure in game. Like if you're curving out in your Rakdos deck. You should not, and you get to 4 mana, you should not be spending a turn off to cast the black card of part of this most of the time, I would say. You just want to slam your 4/4. It's got flying, it's got trample, it's going to beat down and keep applying the pressure. And the upside is good, right? Like if you get to later in the game and you top deck this and you have a lot of mana and you can just get both halves, that's really nice. Or you can just, slot in that adventure at some point in your curve where it doesn't cost you too much. And the thing, you don't always need the treasure to play the spell, right? Like, you have both red and black mana, presumably, like, a decent chunk of your opponents, you'll be able to take something you can just cast, which is quite nice. But, yeah, I'm kind of skeptical just there's a lot of good Rakdos gold cards, and I think that's effectively what this is. And I suspect it just falls short a bit. I think, the fact that some of the time you're not going to be able to cast your card until you've got to attack with your dragon is a bit.
No, yeah, completely agree.
Next up, we have Embereth Veteran. This is a single red mana for a creature human knight, and it is a 2/1, and I'm already pretty interested. Also has the ability to pay 1 and sacrifice Embereth Veteran to create a young hero role token attached to another target creature. Yeah, this is really good. Yeah, red for a 2/1 really doesn't need much help. Red gets a lot fewer 2-mana creatures than white does, for example, and red decks also want 1 mana 2-power creatures. I think this is obviously this is worse than Ragavan. I think that goes without saying. It's probably also worse than Goblin Guide, and guess sometimes it's worse than Dragon's Rage Chandler. It certainly goes in fewer decks than Dragon's Rage Chandler. But I think this is better than Zergo, for example, which sees a decent chunk of play in a lot of cubes. The sacrifice part of it, you're not going to do this super early very often, but it will definitely come up that you if you have one creature that's slightly bigger than everything you've got and it's blanking your board, where you can sacrifice this, put the roll on another one of your small creatures, and it attacks slightly bigger, and it can maybe help you punch through, which is pretty nice. That's very valid application late game. Maybe you can stick on an evasive creature. Obviously, you can't put this on a dragon. It only gets the counters if it's toughness 3 or less. But it will make it will give you an attack a decent amount of the time, and that's pretty good upside on your red for a 2/1. It wasn't all that long ago people put Jackal Pup in cubes,
I love the fact that you were talking about Ragavan and stuff. Yeah, I put my cube together 4 years ago, and I had Jackal Pup in it, and it wasn't maybe 4 years ago that was not correct, but people were still putting Jackal Pup in their cube 4 years ago. The world has fast forwarded so quickly. Oh well, I guess 1-drops in red have fast forwarded so quickly. Yeah,
yeah, 100%. This also has some other kind of interesting applications. So, for example, if you put this roll token on a walking ballista, that's a pretty powerful engine.
Oh, let's go.
Because you can attack and get your counter on it, which can then obviously start mowing stuff down, and it's really powerful. And it never gets too big, right? Because when it's going to get out of range, you remove some counters to spread some damage around. That's pretty nice. I'm kind of interested in that. I guess in things like Hangerback Walker, other places where those counters have extra value is kind of interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. This is just a super solid card. I really like it. Yeah. I haven't got too much more to add. It's 1 mana for a 2/1 in red. The floor is so little, as again, I was talking about Jackal Pup. So, yeah, really cool card. Peasant legal. It'll be played in Peasant cubes up all the way to powered, probably. Yeah, very cool card. All right, let's move on to Kellen the Fey-Blooded. It is 2 and a red for a 2/2 legendary creature human fairy with double strike, and other creatures you control get +1/+0 for each aura and equipment attached to Kellen the Fey-Blooded. It also has an adventure. Birthright Boon is 1 and a red for a sorcery. Search your library for an aura or equipment card, reveal it, and put it into your hand. So, obviously, here is the obligatory Boris equipment card that we talk about in every single set. I do quite like this one, if I'm honest with you. I've liked the last couple. Maybe we're getting there. Let's talk about the creature first. So, 3 mana, 2/2 double strike is actually, I think that's just actually a good body. I'm actually quite happy with that. That is just very solid. The buff to all your creatures, even if you're not doing a full-on equipment matters section, it's not hard to imagine a world where if you see this early, you then take the Bone Splitter slightly higher, that kind of thing. It's not hard to imagine a world where even if you're not going full equipment, you can get a buff on this at some point over the course of your games. If you are doing an equipment matters thing, then this does become obviously way better because it becomes an anthem for all of your team. And then obviously the sorcery adventure side of things that tutors for an aura or an equipment that'll obviously help you get that. I do think most of the time you're going to be going for the equipment over the auras, again, just because of... Oh, actually, now I think about that, this does actually get you, like, pacifism effects. This actually gets you, like, planar disruption, some of the pacifism effects. So so the fact that this can get you some removal is quite nice. And obviously we mentioned when we were talking about tutoring for auras earlier, it can also get your Splinter Twin, so as a nice little tutor for your combo pieces, if that's the way you're going with it. But generally, if you're putting this card in your cube, it's probably going to be because you're supporting the Boros equipment aggro style thing, and you're probably just going to get a Bone Splitter or a Jitte if you got that, a cheap bit of equipment to put onto this creature to buff up its power, to buff up the rest of your board. That is a nice little combo, or a nice little... Yeah, a combination. It's not a combo, it is a combination. I quite like that. James, at some point, we're really going to have to talk about Boros equipment, like, properly.
You mean instead of in every set review saying this is good in Boros equipment and no one ever builds it, and
yeah, but
no one ever puts it in their cubes.
But this is actually just a really good creature, I think.
No, I do agree. I think there's probably enough of this stuff now that it's worth supporting it. I don't really I'm not saying if you had it in your pile, you'd never put it in your deck if you weren't full on equipment. But I suspect it doesn't quite make it into many cubes unless you're supporting an equipment matters deck. Because I think there are just better, like, Boros Gold cards available. But yeah, if you have it, this is powerful. Like, there are a bunch of decks where they, you look at their first 2 turns of plays and you're like, well, that deck can never beat Numazawa Jitte. And then if you have one in your deck, you go and get it, right? And yeah, the body's nice. It's, once you're buffing it up, 2/2 double strike is scary. It's going to give you that buff effect for the rest of your team. It's got quite a lot going on, I think, this card. Yeah, I think, as you mentioned, it is, if you have this card in your pool and you're going to play it, it is probably worth prioritizing a aura removal spell if you can. Something like Ossification is quite a good one. Chain to the Rocks works. Because it's nice to have that toolbox effect, right? But yeah, if you have some powerful equipments in your deck, card looks strong.
Ooh, hold on, this can get animate dead.
Oh, there we go.
Right, that's actually quite spicy. Sorry, I just typed the word aura into my cube list and that one popped up. That's quite cool.
Yeah. if you're I don't know how we're what deck has Boros Mana and Animate Dead, really, but we can make something work. How about this, right? We're Boros aggro, our opponent's on Reanimator, and then we just board in a black splash for Animate Dead and we get them on favor 2.
I love it. Yeah, because we've hate drafted the Animate Dead, which is that's
exactly.
not like I'm not direct. No. Yeah, I've probably done that at some point.
Yeah. But yeah, I think in general, you probably do want to be supporting a sort of equipment theme here. This isn't something like Stoneforge Mystic, where it's so powerful it's just gonna be great in any deck with 1 or 2 equipments. Yeah.
Yeah, it just goes in no matter what you're doing if you're white. Yeah.
Next up is Ogre Tritlord. It is 4 red for a creature ogre warrior. It is a 6/5 with menace. And when Ogre Tritlord enters the battlefield or attacks, create 2 1/1 black rat creature tokens with this creature can't block. Then, if you control 5 or more rats, each rat you control gets +2/+0 until end of turn. I think this card's really bad. It's a 6-drop that doesn't do anything to stabilize you, really, because the rats can't block. I'd be kind of into it if the rats could block, but yeah, that's kind of rough. Like, 1/1s that can't block, 1/1s don't attack well. 1/1s very rarely have good attacks. So when they can't block, you're kind of struggling to use them. Sure, there will be games where, this gets to attack uncontested a few times. You get to 5 rats and it kills your opponent. Absolutely. But, all 6-drop creatures will win you the game if left uncontested. And this, for me, just doesn't do enough to stabilize, and it doesn't like leave enough value behind if it's killed. So I think I'm pretty off for Chitterlord, I'm afraid.
Right. So I'm assuming you're not going to agree with this note I have written down in front of me. The red Grave Titan.
I would struggle to disagree more with that. Yeah.
Right. Okay. No. I can say that. What I would say is, I think in budget cubes, I think this is actually quite a strong 6-drop in more budget leaning cubes. It'll in those kind of environments, you're more likely to see things like aristocrats. Mana dorks into this is also quite good. And if you're looking to build a cube on a budget, then like this is going to be cheaper than stuff like Inferno Titan, or like I don't actually have any red 6s in my cube anymore, but this will be cheaper than a lot of them, and I think in those environments it will win you games if you can get to a point where you're buffing up your rats. Then it will make them a lethal threat. But yeah, I do completely concede that kind of in more competitive environments, it's not as good as Grave Titan. That's as fun. Yeah.
Hot take there. Yeah, I would say that between the power level of Inferno Titan and the power level of this exists many, many magic cards. And some of them will be budget enough that you could buy them. But maybe I'm too low on it. Do let us know if you disagree.
All right, let's move on to our next card. Next up, we have Scalding Viper. This is 1 red for a 2/1 creature elemental snake. With whenever an opponent casts a spell with mana value 3 or less, Scalding Viper deals 1 damage to that player. It also has an adventure, which is Steam Clean. It is 1 and a blue for a sorcery. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. So, I think this is pretty solid, actually. Let's talk about the creature first. So, that is a good, annoying effect that will come up quite a lot in Cube, because generally in Cube, like, you don't run that many high... Like, because you're running the best of cards, that generally means that the cards you're running are cheaper, because you're running the best of them. So the curve in Cube is generally lower. And if you're in the red aggressive deck, so the Piker is a fine body in those decks. You're not blown away by it, but the fact that it's going to hopefully get through for some damage, but also then just sit there and punish your opponents for everything that they're doing, or for a large portion of what they're going to be doing, is going to be nice. The sorcery element, if this was an instant, I would be way more higher on it. That would make it much closer to... What's the one we already have in Cube, James? The...
Brazen Borrower?
That's it. Yeah. This is effectively the same adventure as Brazen Borrower, but it is a sorcery. I still think that is fine. Like, it is cheap. It's 2 mana. It is a nice tempo play. In it is its spells deck. I do kind of like this combination of the two. Actually, no. Do I? No, I don't like this in its spells deck, because all your stuff's going to be cheap and it's going to ping you for a ton of damage.
It is spells your opponent's control.
I like it. It's fantastic. I love it more. Yeah, I think this is a perfectly serviceable card. Like it's one where I can see the red deck wanting this. I can see the blue deck being fine with this as a tempo play, and then together on a card, I can see the Izzet deck actually quite liking this. I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, I can see it. I think I would probably want to be able to cast for sorcery, even if I can't cast it every game. But I would want to have some chunk of blue mana in my deck. The ping effect is good. I say curves in Cube are certainly lower than in something like Limited, or 1,000,000 times lower than something like Commander. But it's not like Modern, where you play your Eidolon of the Great Revel and every spell they play triggers it, right? And the 2/1 is fine, but it will, like, obviously it trades with all their little tokens and whatnot is not great. But if you're like a blue-red aggressive deck, I think this is actually quite strong, because that bounce, if you're really beating down, the sorcery speed doesn't hurt as much, right? Because often then you're going to want to cast your bounce spell at sorcery speed anyway, because you want to get a blocker out of the way and enable an attack. And something those blue-red decks can really struggle with is like they have a bunch of burn spells, right? But then your opponent plays a 5/5 and all your lightning bolts are sad. And this does get the 5/5 out of the way for a turn, and it's a prowess trigger. You often care about that. I can see the sorcery coming up and really like getting in a decent chunk of that damage. Some of the games and the games where you have this in your opening hand, and this is your 2-mana play, the creature's fine.
Right, so I've just done a little bit of math actually. So on the pinging ability, so my cube is 540. This hits 334 things in that. That's what, 2/3?
Yeah,
over half.
That's good.
That's pretty solid.
Yeah, 100%. And there are some decks where it's going to be great, right? Where they're casting all their little cantrips or whatever, and each of those costing them a life against your red deck is going to be nice.
The Lurus Companion deck.
Oh, yes. Cannot beat it.
Perfect.
So first on green, we have Bramble Familiar. This is 1 green for a 2/2 creature elemental raccoon. It taps for a green mana and has the ability 1 green, tap it and discard a card, return Bramble Familiar to its owner's hand. Which doesn't sound very good, but it has an adventure. The adventure is Fetch Quest. For 5 green, you get a sorcery. Mill 7 cards, then put a creature, enchantment, or land from among them onto the battlefield. This seems pretty strong, actually, to me. It's not a mana dork you're excited about, but it's serviceable as 2 mana dorks go. And getting that adventure when you draw this late, or you just flood out and you return it to your hand. If you're playing this man dork, you're presumably playing some other ones as well. You can get up to 7, and this is powerful. Like your green ramp deck, which obviously where this guy belongs, is going to have some expensive creatures. There's no mana gate on the creature you can put into play. It seems pretty powerful. You're really sad if you're putting a land into play from this spell, but I guess it's nice we have that out. But if like 7 cards is a lot, you're going to have a good chance to hit one of your big ramp payoffs. It's kind of unfortunate that you can't hit planeswalkers, like if that's some of the top ends you're ramping into. But like you're not paying a huge amount to put this card into your deck, and Flood is absolutely a thing green ramp decks really struggle with. And this kind of gets around the problem of cheap creature, expensive adventure spell a little bit by giving you that out to return it to your hand. Obviously it's not the most efficient thing in the world, but you can, once you're filling out, you go like, end of your turn, return this to my hand, untap, cast the adventure, hope to hit, your Fate off, your Woodfall Primus, whatever it might be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head, that's the saying. Yeah, it basically does the 2 things that mono green kind of wants from a card. It does neither of them as efficiently as 2 individual cards, but you get both of these effects on 1 card. It's giving you that bit of ramp early enough to play your other spells, and then it is finding you the big thing and it's cheating it into play, hopefully. That's like neither of these are the most efficient we've seen on cards, but the fact, this is 1 card that does both of those things, and that is not something you get at all or often. So I think Bramble Familiar is going to be pretty solid. Especially again, if this card is super cheap, because obviously cards like Natural Order and Hoof are quite expensive. Currently, we're in previews, and this is around it's 50 euros, which I'm going to say is about 50-60 cents. If this card is super cheap, I think this is perfect for budget cubes, and could even see its way into some more powerful ones as well.
I'm assuming that was 50 euro cents. I mean,
yes.
I don't know what happened to the exchange rate, but I'm assuming it's not that bad at this point.
So Scryfall. So I'm assuming this is just the baffery that comes around with cards not being released yet. It's currently $1.36 or 53 cents to a euro, or 53. 0.53 euros. There we go. So that's quite a difference, but it'll balance out at some point. All right, let's move on to, I'm going to say this now, my favorite card in the set. Next, we have Gruff Triplets. This is 3 green, green, green for a 3/3 creature Satyr Warrior. It has Trample, and when Gruff Triplets enters the battlefield, if it isn't a token, create 2 tokens that are copies of it. When Gruff Triplets dies, put a number of +1 counters equal to its power on each creature you control named Gruff Triplets. What that basically means is when this comes into play, you have 9 trample power. If one of them dies, you end up with 2 6/6s with trample. And then if one of them dies, you end up with a 12/12. There are some different ways the math works. If say, like 2 of them die, you end up with a 9/9, I believe it is. But effectively, this is a lot of repeatable power and toughness for just 6 mana. I also like in a ramp deck, this is going to be just a good way of killing people. But the fact that it's making tokens and they're buffing the tokens when it dies means it's perfect for something like a sneak attack deck, and even like Flash, which I know is kind of having a little semi-resurgence now because of it being re-added to the Mitgo Vintage Cube. This seems like a perfect card for that. Like any kind of cheat effects that have the quotation marks downside of sacrificing, this will get around them because it's still leaving you with a bucket load of power and toughness with also trample. I think this card is going to be really, really good. I am hastily looking for what 6 drops will be coming out of my cube for this to go in. Of everything in this set, I think this is the most slam dunk. What do you think, James? Are you as high as this as I am?
I like the card. Yeah, I'm not sure I'm as high as you are by the sounds of it.
Oh, you like the Storm card, don't you?
I want the Storm card to be great.
Yeah,
I'm not sure it is.
That's fair.
No, I do think this is a strong card. You'll have to be a bit careful with your attacks of it. Like, yes, 9 power of trample damage, phenomenal. But and it's hard for them to grind through with removal spells, obviously, because the other ones all get bigger. There will be a lot of times where, like, you play this, they have a board, you can't just swing with all of them, right? In a lot of spots, that's very true. Because they, if they could trade with all the 3/3s, that's terrible for you. Your triggers don't do anything. If they can, so you'll often be in spots where you want to, like, just send one in, you end, even if it just gets eaten, you then have 2 6/6 tramplers, and they probably do have good attacks. As a thing to sneak attack, it's fine, but I think you can do better. Like, 2 6/6s is good, but it's not like, I win the game now, right? It's not like you're sneak attacking an Archon of Cruelty or even like an Ashen Rider. I think is significantly stronger than this, but I think it is fine. And I think similarly with Flash, it's like fine, but there are better things, right?
Oh no, I would agree. But I again, what I like about this is that it goes in those, but it's also just very castable in a green ramp deck. Like it fits that nice kind of overlap point that kind of like Atraxa had recently, where it was a reanimation target that you could natural order for. This is a sneak attack target that is going to be good, going to be solid, and is very attainable in a mono green ramp deck. Basically, kind of it's kind of where I'm putting it.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's not like you're putting sneak attack in the mono green ramp deck. It's just that it goes in multiple decks.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. That's exactly. Yeah. More from like a cube structure point of view, this ticks the boxes that I want, basically. Like,
that makes sense.
Covers enough things.
Yeah, for sure. It's also it's cool. It's really good with clones.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah.
To clone, you now have 6 of these guys, and if one of them dies, it pumps all the other ones. If one dies, you now have like 5 6/6 tramplers. If 2 die, you have 4 9/9. That's that will close some games. I think the card's good.
Awesome. Right. Do you want to take it away with our next card, James?
Yeah. So next up, we have a card that was described to me as the regrowthiest regrowth that ever did regrowth. It is Loam Crafter Fawn. It is 2 and a green for a 3/3 creature Satyr Druid. When the Lonecrafter Fawn enters the battlefield, you may discard 1 or more land cards. When you do, return up to that many target non-land permanent cards from your graveyard to your hand. This is a cool little value card, I think. Primarily, I think you want this if you're recurring lands. Because obviously you can just recur lands you discard, but I think kind of more importantly, if you're doing the like Ren and 6 Crucible of World thing, you have that going, you end up with 1 million lands in hand, right? Because you're making your land drops out of your graveyard, not out of your hand, and you draw some lands.
Very true. Yeah.
Wind up in hand. And if you play this later, this just like restocks your hand so well. It is unfortunate that it's non-land permanent. It can't get your instants and sorceries, but I think I think this has a role in those decks as like a later game value play. Once you're like attritioning your opponents out and stuff. It's a really nice way to restock. I think it's particularly good if your recursion engine is Life from the Loam, because obviously like dredging that will fuel your graveyard with good things to recur. Maybe some like Loam Bazaar pile can make good use of works.
I do like cards that make Life from the Loam better.
Oh yeah.
You've got me, James. You've got me.
Cool. That was easy. Yeah, like I don't think it's like an insane card or anything, but I think it could have a home.
No, definitely. Yeah, like I'm really in a weird place with the lands deck right now. It's definitely one that I just need to kind of spend more time thinking of, because we've been trying some different things in my queue. Like we've been trying like a bit of a Golgari splash to do some of the sacrificing stuff. We've also obviously got like the 5-color kind of like goalless style things. I think it's in a bit of a weird place. Like there's so many of these awesomely powerful cards. I think it's another one that kind of I just need to get a group of people just like, okay, how do we do this? And then we'll make some content about it. So
yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, as much as I do like this card, I suspect this one isn't the answer to that problem. I think, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's generally the value is not the issue you have. The issue you have is like speed and like life.
Yeah.
What you want is more like, more of exploration effects, like you go faster, more good removal, more like combo stuff with like Zone Orb, not so much this like later game value thing. But
no, exactly.
I think maybe in slightly less powerful cubes stuff.
No, I could see that being cool. Like the other, I want them to print us a lands matter cards that doesn't cost 3 mana in green, because that's kind of where they all are. Like I'm just looking at mine. We have like Corsair Crewfix, Strider the Hissing Grove, Nissa Resurgent Animist, Ramunap Excavator, Tireless Tracker, Tireless Provisioner, and we've just cut some as well. Like this would probably be too good at 2 mana for a 1/1. I'm assuming get it out too early, but yeah, cool card. There will be some utility there. All right, let's move on to our next green card, although it is secretly a Golgari card. Mosswood Dread Knight. It is 1 and a green for a 3/2 creature human knight with trample. And when it dies, you may cast it from your graveyard as an adventure until the end of your next turn. So shockingly, this has an adventure. Dread Whispers is 1 and a black for a sorcery. You draw a card and lose 1 life. I actually quite like this card. This goes in the decks I like. It's a Golgari or maybe even a Jund grindy kind of aggro deck. Like this is, I think you're with this kind of little engine, you're kind of always going to be happy playing this, attacking with it. Like 2 mana for a 3/2 trample is just a perfectly fine body, like at its base. Like a Gruul aggressive deck would be perfectly fine playing this on 2 and swinging with it. But this really shines when you can reliably like have it trade off with something or eat a removal spell. Then the next turn, play the adventure to then put it back in the adventure zone so you can then cast it from adventure. So that's kind of how the recursion thing works. Is basically it comes into play, it dies, you then can cast the adventure part of it again, and then it goes into the adventure zone so you can then cast it from there and put it back into play. So in theory, this card is really, really hard to get rid of unless it's either being exiled or you're specifically not choosing to cast the adventure from the graveyard. I quite like this card. I think it fills a number of roles. It's a good grindy Golgari card while also being a solid aggressive body.
Yeah, I agree. I think this card's really strong. Like, I think it's one where very frequently you'll not cast the adventure first, right? You want to get cast the creature first, probably the majority of the time, because 3/2 trample is better early than it is late. And you can get this adventure back. Yeah, really, really nice value engine. Obviously not one for not every green deck wants this sort of small ball value thing. But I think green-black is kind of a nice place for it. Combining this with some removal spells, some hand disruption, and yeah, this is your value engine. Also, cool if you have a sack outlet, you can like get your value on demand rather than relying on your opponent to kill this. Because if you're short of resources, your opponent just isn't going to kill this card, right? They'll just let you have your 3/2 trample. But I think there's some really good stuff going on with this, and yeah, the body being 3/2 is like, it's big enough that your opponent can't just be like, oh, I don't want you to get your card, I'm just going to keep taking 3.
Yeah.
Like, 3 is a real clock. And yeah, hard to get rid of. Good aggressive body. Nothing wrong with this card at all. So next up, we have Questing Druid. This is 1 green for a 1/1 creature human druid. With whenever you cast a spell that's white, blue, black, or red, you put a +1/+1 counter on Questing Druid. People who were playing Magic a long time ago might have noticed that this is exactly the same as the text on Quirion Druid, but this one has an adventure. For 1 and a red, you can Seek the Beast. It is an instant with exile the top 2 cards of your library until your next end step. You may play these cards. Yeah, I think this is a really interesting card, actually. Quirion Druid is a card that has seen quite a lot of, which is just the creature side of this, is a card that has seen quite a lot of play in constructed formats over the years, but never really been a cube card, because this is often just not what green is doing in cube. Like, you want to play it with generally a lot of cantrips and counter spells. That pairs really nicely with blue, actually, because you get to keep the spells flowing, you protect your threat, and it just grows over time. One of the really big downsides of Quirion Druid is that it's horrible top deck, because you've already cast a million spells and it takes a long time to grow again. Whereas this is quite a good top deck, because you get some card draw along with it. It's also quite nice that, because it's until your next end step, you can like play the adventure, then cast for Quirion Druid, and the next turn you can play the spells you exile, which hopefully trigger your Questing Druid. Sorry, not Quirion Druid. I think it still kind of has the issue of, is this what green is doing in cube? But too often playing this like little creature that grows over time and like trying to protect it and win with that. But I think it's a cool card. Like, obviously, you don't want to play this in a deck that's really heavy green. You want to be playing a lot of other colors with it. Say cantrips are great risks. They let you keep that train growing, let it keep growing. But yeah, I think this is an interesting card. What do you think?
No, 100%. Like, I really want I really like Quirion Druid. I really like that style of, yeah, like the miracle grow. The creature just grows over the course of game by you playing Magic. I think the issue with that is just the power level of it. Like, we've just talked about a 2-mana 3/2 with trample with grindy value upside. This is a 2-mana 1/1 that you need, that has some value upside in the source, in the adventure, but then for it to become as much power, there's going to be threat pressure on your opponent. You have to cast spells afterwards. Like, I really wish that these cards were really good. There will definitely be environments like where basically, yeah, I just think the issue is that just the power level with these type of decks isn't there at the moment. It doesn't mean it might not be there in the future. Like, who knows? Maybe they'll give us some multicolored evoke creatures in Modern Horizons 3, and then all of a sudden you're putting 2 or 3 cards on this out of nowhere. But at the moment, I think this one's a bit hard. especially if you are thinking like this is in theory a Gruul card, and as I mentioned, the last Golgari card, the Gruul deck will want more because it deals more damage quicker, basically. And I think that's the biggest issue with this card. Yeah, just a bit too slow, unfortunately. I think it's cool. I love it, but I just don't think it's there anymore.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I think I'd be much more into it if the adventure half was blue rather than red.
Yes, I can see that.
Like, imagine you play this card, then you daze this play and cast a cantrip, and now you're just doing it. But yeah, Gruul seems like a bit of a weird home for it. I'd also like to get ahead of all of the comments that the card I'm talking about is Quirion Dryad, not Druid.
Is it? Are you sure? Oh, my notes definitely have Quirion Druid as well. But...
Oh, interesting. We both came to that conclusion.
All good. Yeah. All right, let's move on to the Goose Mother, our first full-on gold card of the day, and actually our only full-on gold card of the day. It is X, green, and a blue for a 2/2 legendary creature, Bird Hydra. It has flying, and the Goose Mother enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. When the Goose Mother enters the battlefield, create half X food tokens rounded up. Whenever Goose Mother attacks, you may sacrifice a food. If you do, draw a card. So the biggest comparison to this card is Hydroid Crisis. It does something similar. It draws you half X cards and half X life, where X is the amount of mana you're putting into it, but you still get the counters on it in the same way. I think they are both, well, obviously they're comparable because they do a very similar thing. I think I'm probably a bit higher on this if you're specifically wanting to get a creature that you're attacking with sooner. Because this is, on rate, this is a 2/2, whereas Hydroid Crisis come down as a 0/0 with the counters on it. So even if you're just playing this for the 2 mana, you are getting a 2/2 flyer. Like, the rate is up from there, which is just going to be good. The life gain, like, in terms of in terms of how the cards work, the life gain is probably comparable because this will make you food tokens as well. With this, it's more you have to choose which one you want. You either get the life gain or you get the cards. Realistically, we're taking the cards most of the time, whereas with the Hydroid Crisis, you can kind of get a little bit of both. But comparing the two, I think I prefer the Goose Mother just because it's going to be bigger.
Yeah, I can see that. I kind of think, like, Hydroid Crisis is the obvious comparison. I actually think they want to go in very different decks. I don't really like this as your big mana payoff. Like, the thing you really want to do with Hydroid Crisis is get up to loads of mana and cast it for, like, X is 6, right? And then you restock your hand, you gain a bunch of life straight away, and you have a massive body. But even if they kill it, you're still happy. You've got your life and your cards. This doesn't really work that way, right? Because you don't get the cards up front. You get the cards when you attack. Having said that, I think it might be a better card. I think the ways I'm interested in playing this card is, like, as a 3/3 for 3 mana. 3 mana 3/3 flyer is already good, and I get a card off it when I attack.
Yeah, that's pretty solid.
5 mana 5/5 flyer. I can draw 2 cards over 2 turns. Also great. That's very different from what Hydroid Crisis does. Hydroid Crisis is not a playable card at 3 mana. It's a 3 mana 1/1 flyer that does nothing else. I quite like this card. I think it's in a weird spot because I think it kind of wants to go in a, like, kind of aggressive tempo-y deck, which is not really what blue-green is doing.
Yeah, a lot of the time it's not.
Yeah. I mean, like, you can play it as, like, a good 5 mana play. Like, if they kill it, you're sad. But if they don't, it's going to be really good. I think the spot you'd maximize this really is, like, if you had a more tempo-y blue-green deck, which is interested in, like, a 3/3 flyer for 3 that can beat down and maybe draw you a card. Even as, like, getting aggressive and I'm another 2-drop, like 2/2 flyer for 2, perfectly good card. I think it is better in those spots than as a, like, payoff for having a lot of mana. And I think that leaves it in kind of a weird spot in Cube just because that's rarely what green is doing. Or what green-blue is doing specifically. Green-blue tends to be very much about that.
Yeah, so especially nowadays, just because of, I guess, the cards that they printed. Like beforehand, blue-green was, or like 4 or 5 years ago, blue-green tempo was more of a thing. And to be honest, that's where you ran cards like Quirion Dryad. Like, that's when those were seeing play, when tempo was more of a thing, because that incidental value is actually quite tempo-y. You're kind of just staying ahead of your opponent type jobby. But yeah, interesting card. Like I could see this seeing a decent amount of play in a fair number of cubes, actually, just because it is a above rate flying creature.
Yeah, so. and scales well with the game, right? It's not it's not nothing, but when you draw this late and you flood it out and you have 7 mana, it's huge and scary, and if they can't kill it, they'll probably die. It's just not the best thing available to be doing if you're planning to get to 7.
Oh, exactly. And the other thing about this card, the picture's just haunting, dude. Like, you must have been attacked by a goose or a swan as a kid or something like that. Like where I grew up, in between my friend's house and the Tesco was a load of really aggressive geese. So this with like all these heads is not good for me.
There's so many necks. I can't really see where all the necks are coming from. Yeah,
haunting, mate. Haunting. I am not on board with this.
Yeah, fair enough. You're fine with all the stuff you get out of Innistrad and whatnot.
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
But it's the goose that's the real.
It's got 6 heads, James. 6 heads. It can snap at you from 360. I don't like that.
Maybe there's a horror film in this.
100%.
Goose-based horror film, Attack of the Geese 2, will be coming to a cinema near you too. The only colourless and artifact card we have is, I guess, the follow-up to Gingerbrute. This is Sir Ginger, the Meal Ender. It is 2 generic mana for a 3/1 legendary artifact creature food knight. Sir Ginger, the Meal Ender, has trample, hexproof, and haste as long as an opponent controls a planeswalker. And whenever another artifact you control is put into a graveyard from a battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on Sir Ginger and scry 1. And because it is a food, you can, of course, pay 2 mana, sacrifice Sir Ginger, and not gain 3 life. Gain life equal to its power. So if it has grown, you get more life.
It's a legendary food, James.
It is a legendary food. Yeah. This is cool. It's the Planeswalker text is like situationally going to be phenomenal, but is obviously like not something you're relying on. So when it comes up, it'll be great, but it's not like a huge part of should you put this card in your deck or not.
Yeah, it's kind of annoying that is the first line of text on the card, like in the rules box. I'd rather just be down the bottom so you can ignore it a bit quicker. But
sure. So you really have to be maximizing this whenever another artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield. Put a counter on it and scry. So I guess this probably means that if it has a home, it's in some sort of artifact deck that can sacrifice it. Maybe you're playing like Oni Cult Anvil. Maybe you're doing some Arcbound Ravager stuff. Is pretty interesting. And then if you're pulling that off, you get a cheap creature that grows. Thing is, 3/1's just such an underwhelming body as the thing. Like, it just trades with everything. I don't think it's horrible. I could see it in, like, you want, like, an aggressive artifact deck, but can also sacrifice its artifacts. So I think it is good there. I think so I think it comes in as sort of fairly powerful, but quite narrow in where you.
No, I think that's fair. I think specifically given the position of where my cube is, where we have a artifact aggro deck and also a red-black sacrifice artifact deck, I'm actually quite excited for this card. I think this is going to be actually quite solid. Specifically in mine, like links to my cube will be down in the description below if anyone wants to check it out. But in mine, we kind of have a mono-brown aggressive section, which is just crying out for more better creatures. And I think this could be good enough to get in. Just like, I completely agree, 2 mana for a 3/1 is not good. But the fact that this is colorless means that no matter what your mana is, you can cast it onto, you're guaranteed to play the aggressive creature. and its synergy with other cards around, like play this with like this with an Arcbound Ravager is going to be good, but this with like a Steel Overseer, like obviously any artifact creature is good with the Steel Overseer. That's the one that 2 mana 1/1, you tap it to put a +1 counter on each artifact creature you control. Like that works with any artifact creatures, but just having more density of good aggressive ones, I think is going to be pretty solid. If I'm honest with you, I quite like it, and just having it's a density thing, and there really isn't that, like, the quality of aggressive cheap artifact creatures does fall off a cliff quite quickly.
Yeah, for sure.
We are currently running actual factual Ginger Brute in my cube at the moment. Whether that's correct or not, I am open to the debate. I will probably cut that for this legendary Ginger Brute. Let's go. But
yeah, I think if there is a cube where this is good, it's probably your cube, because you have you have exactly that deck in there. And I think it'll be interesting to see how it performs. It's also nice relative to I've seen quite a lot of artifact creatures recently that have a color, like so this is nice over that, because obviously you have reliability, but it also means you an Ancient Tomb it out on turn 1, right? Or we'll get it out with Mishra's Workshop on turn 1. And on turn 1, the 3/1 is a lot better.
You can Mishra's Workshop this and regular Ginger Brute.
Oh, there we go.
There we go. That's some big games. Yeah.
they may as well concede at that point, really.
Exactly.
You have 2 Ginger Brutes on turn 1.
Never stood a chance.
Yeah, mono gingerbread aggro.
No, very good. Yeah. I can completely understand why I'm higher on this card than you are. But yeah, I this is one I'm going to be testing. It's one I have pre-ordered. It'll be in the cube.
Yeah, no. I can see it in your cube for sure. I think there are like cubes that don't have that exact deck. I don't think it will be good. But
100%, yes.
For yours, I think it's pretty interesting. Yeah, I think it's worth a try.
Right, we're going to move over to our lands now, and we have a new cycle of creature-based lands. They all come into play tapped. They tap for 2 colors of mana and have an activated ability to turn the land into a creature until end of turn, and then they have some ability when they attack. The first one we're going to touch on is Restless Fortress. This enters the battlefield tapped, taps for a white and a black. For 2 white and a black, it becomes a 1/4 white and black nightmare creature until end of turn. It is still a land, and when it attacks, defending player loses 2 life and gains 2 life. As a creature-based land, this is slightly underwhelming to me, just because 4 mana for a 1/4 isn't that good. Like, if this is what you're doing, so for me, a 1/4 screams blocker, but you only get the drain ability when you're attacking with it. It is nice that you're guaranteed to get that drain when you do attack with it, because it's effectively kind of guaranteeing you that 4-point life swing, and it having 4 toughness means it's probably not going to die. But if you're at a point where you're spending 4 mana on this ability, I don't think you're super happy. It is a bit pricey for that effect. I'm not super blown away by this one, if I'm honest with you. I think it compares slightly worse than a card like Shambling Vent, which is the original cycle of these creature-based lands. I think for that reason, it's probably going to struggle to see much play, because I don't think you're going to want to run more than 1 creature-based land in each colors if that's the way you're going with your land section.
And it's fine. Like, the life swing is really good when you have an attack with this. Obviously, this isn't something you're doing early in the game. It's something you're doing when you're low on resources and you don't have a lot else to do with your mana. The life swing's good. The thing is, it doesn't obviously trade well in combat, right? It's if they have 4 power block back to block this, then they can probably just eat it. But maybe the threat of this attack is making them leave a creature back to block it, and that's saving you some life itself. I don't think it's terrible. I think it's maybe a little worse than Shambling Vent, but not a lot. I feel like in a lot of ways, games of especially more powerful cubes now, the creature lands are a lot less effective than they used to be. The games just don't come down to that as much. As the power level of the best cards has gone up so much, the game's just ending quicker. You don't go down as much, I think, to oh, they have like one creature, but I have this creature land, and we have nothing else going on, you know?
No, definitely 100%. I guess there is, like, with all of these creature lands, is probably just briefly worth touching on. They are. Would you agree that they're probably slightly better in controller slower decks? Like that's kind of where like Celestial Colonnade, the white green one, and the white blue one has seen a lot of play because you can wrath the board and answer to people's threats, and then swing through with your creature land because it didn't die to the previous board wipes.
Yeah, 100%. I think they're good if you're just trying to run your opponent out of resources. So yeah, it can be like blue-based control decks, or just like removal heavy, discard heavy, like black attrition decks. I think can make good use of them. Say, for example, in Jund in Modern, you saw is just try and win with its Raging Ravines a bunch of the time.
Okay.
That sort of strategy, right, where you're trying to run your opponent out of resources.
Yeah,
it can be good.
I briefly played Modern a while ago, and I was playing against Esper Control, where the win conditions was only Celestial Colonnades.
Phenomenal.
That was the only way of actually winning the game.
Love that.
Was long.
I think actually in a lot of ways the best use of creature lands in Cube is to pressure your opponent's planeswalkers.
That's fair, yeah.
Because you're not willing to invest mana in the middle of the game to deal a few points of damage to your opponent. But if you can kill a planeswalker, you are willing to invest mana in that, right? And it often makes your opponents leave back creatures to block. And if the creature lands have evasion, that can be very good at pressuring planeswalkers. Things like Creeping Tar Pit and Celestial Colonnade. And that is a big downside of this black-white one, is that your opponent loses 2 life. It doesn't do anything to planeswalkers. You can attack a planeswalker for 1. This is not effective.
Yeah, I think as we'll go through the cycle in this set, only one sort of has evasion, and it's just trample. But we'll get on to that. Do you want to read our Is It one, James?
Yeah, sure. So next up, we have Restless Spire. Same as ATB tap. This is the blue-red one. Taps for blue or red. And you can play just a blue and a red for Restless Spire to become a 2/1 blue and red elemental creature token with, as long as it's your turn, this creature has first strike. And when Restless Spire attacks, you scry 1. So this is pretty interesting because it's such a cheap activation. But you can very frequently activate this and play other spells in your turn, right? If you have other ways to use all of your mana, you'll often choose not to do this. But if you have an attack with your 2/1 first strike and you have essentially 3 mana lying around, right? Because it's 2 to activate, and you're not tapping this for mana, you're attacking with it. If you have that 3 mana lying around, you get a scry and you get 2 damage in. The first strike on your turns means if they don't have a 3 toughness blocker for your 2/1 first strike, maybe you can put a bit of pressure on a planeswalker, pressure their life total, get your scry. I think this is one of the better ones. I quite like this. I think it compares very well, I think, to Wandering Fumarole, which is the older version of a blue-red creature land, which had a much more expensive activation cost. I quite like this one.
Yeah, same. Yeah. I think this is actually I do like this more than Wandering Fumarole. I think it compares pretty well. It just is going to be used more. Like a Wandering Fumarole was, I think, 4 mana to activate for a 1/4 that you could swap it and it could become a 4/1. But that just means it will die a lot of the. It's either not doing anything or it's dying in combat.
Yeah.
This one, yeah, it's just so cheap that I think it's going to be pretty good, actually. Yeah, I quite like this one.
Yeah, for sure. I think the first strike only on your turn it obviously makes it a lot worse, a defensive thing, right?
Yeah.
And probably to prevent the feel bads of, oh, I forgot you had a creature land in your 3 untapped mana, and now I get to eat your creature. But yeah, I quite like the card.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. Yeah, I like Restless Spire. Right, let's move on to Restless Cottage. This is the Golgari one, so this one taps for a black and a green. It has the activate ability 2 black and a green, and it becomes a 4/4 black and green horror creature until end of turn. It's still a land. And whenever it attacks, create a food token and exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard. The abilities on that, like the attack abilities on that, are nice. The food token, bit of life gain, and exiling card from a graveyard. is nice utility, but the reason why I like this is just 4/4s will kill people. Like it'll like this can trade with a lot of relevant creatures. It'll put off people attacking you if you're kind of flooding out, or it can just pressure them, which means I actually quite like this one. 4 mana for a 4 for each turn. Like it's not entirely where you want to be, but in grindy games, which is kind of what Golgari is doing, I think this is quite a good way of actually kind of just pressuring an opponent. And like, yeah, if you compare it to like the other creature land, the Hissing Quagmire, that's 3 mana for it to become a 2/2 Death Touch until end of turn. That's more annoying, but this will like they'll both kind of trade with similar style of creatures, but this will kill your opponent quicker. So therefore, I think I like Restless Cottage a bit more.
Yeah, it seems interesting. It's 4 mana to activate, so just down 5 mana really.
Yes.
It is your whole turn probably. But yeah, if you're low resource of that is fine. Also just blocks well. Obviously you're not getting the food on blocks, but if you're aggressive opponent and it has like a couple of creatures left, they're kind of small, and you're out, but you just have this creature land lying around and they can't attack into you, that's great upside to get off your land.
You could easily see a scenario where you're holding up like a Doomblade variant. Your opponent doesn't attack you because you have this activated, and then you can just pick off the creature that you were stopping you from attacking you anyway, or something like that. Like, I quite like the cottage. I think it could be quite good.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Next up, we have Restless Bivouac. This is the red-white creature land, and it taps for one of either color, and for 1 a red and a white, Restless Bivouac becomes a 2/2 red and white ox creature until end of turn. And whenever Restless Bivouac attacks, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. So this one is very much about the attack trigger rather than the stats. The stats are not good. But it's really nice this counter can be spread around as well. Like, it's a nice way to, in the late game, you might even be fine just throwing this away to get that counter on another creature to enable an attack with that. You put it on an evasive creature, you can just put it on your 4/4 to let it attack through their 4/4. This is cool. I love that. I think this is fine. I guess the downside is it's obviously leaning towards an aggressive deck, but aggressive decks don't want tap lands.
Yeah, 100%.
Like, much as this is a fine effect to have, I'd always rather have, a pain land, for example, that enters untapped in my red-white deck than have this.
No, definitely, completely agree. Like, yeah, I stopped doing like full cycles of lands in Cube a while ago. Like obviously, like I have proxy original duels and like shocks and fetches and stuff. But like after that, kind of like I started tailoring the lands to what the decks wanted, and like the Boris one wants an untapped land. It wants something like it wants an inspiring advantage. It wants a fast land. Like Restless Bivouac is going to be a really hard sell for me because any aggressive deck just. It's not going to want to play this. Like, imagine you have a 2-land hand and this is your second land and you don't draw another one. Like, you're just that just slows you down way too much. Like, you want to be guaranteeing you're curving out, and this does not do that.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think it's sort of one of the stronger in terms of the effect that the creature gets, but just doesn't fit because the evasive deck doesn't want tap land, I think.
The next one, Restless Vinestalk, I actually quite like. This is the Simic one, so it taps for a green or a blue. It has the activate ability 3 green and a blue. Until the turn, it becomes a 5/5 green and blue plant creature token with trample. It is still a land, and when it attacks, up to 1 of the target creature has base power and toughness 3/3 until end of turn. So I actually quite like this one. Like the 3 mana for this plus this is a lot. So this is 6 mana to activate the ability, but at that point you are getting a 5/5, and in an ideal world you are turning a Llanowar Elves into a 3/3, which means you're attacking with 8 power, 5 of it has trample. In a big mana Simic deck, I think this could be like this is not game plan A, B, or C, but it is a I think this could be quite a solid kind of just backup of kind of like, well, if things have entirely, if I'm flooding, I can do this. If all my stuff has been answered, I can do this. All I need is one dorky creature. If the board has been wrathed on like turn 8, I've got nothing going on, or I've drawn a Llanowar Elves and I've drawn this, I can now attack with 8 power. I quite like that, if I'm honest with you. Maybe that scenario is a little bit niche, and a lot of the time you're just never going to get to the point where you're activating this. But if you're out of gas, I could see points in a game where I think this could be quite good.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I think this is it's a lot of mana, but you get paid for it. It's a lot to send at a life total. It's a lot to send at a planeswalker. It demands multiple blockers. I think this is cool. It's also nice that you can target your opponent's creature with the
that's pretty cool.
power and toughness effect. If they have something really big, you can shrink it down to a 3/3, and then your 5/5 has a good attack. I think it has some good stuff going on.
All right, that is going to do it for the set review, but we have one more little topic before we get you all out of it. Me and James are going to go through our favourite cards that we like for Cube. James, you want to take it away with your number 5 slot?
Yeah, so number 5, I have gone with Werefox Bodyguard. This is the Flash Fiend Hunter effect, where you can sacrifice it, you can save your own creatures. I think this is a nice little twist on this effect. We've not seen one that comes at instant speed before. I think this is fairly strong.
No, very cool. No, my number 5 is also a white card, but I've gone for Spellbook Vendor. I think it's just going to be a very solid creature that is just going to... I think it'll play out pretty well. I think it's just going to be there, making your creatures bigger, and I think the scry is actually going to be more annoyingly relevant than I think maybe I thought it was initially. I think just giving white decks that additional bit of reach is going to be quite nice, that little bit of card selection on a perfectly solid body as well. So, yeah, Spellbook Vendor is my number 5.
Nice. Number 4, I have gone for Gruff Triplets. It's a lot of power. I think it's going to do... I think ramping into this is going to end some games. It's pretty hard. It doesn't end the game right away, but it's just really hard to deal with in a productive way unless you're like exiling things or wrathing for board. I think the card's pretty strong.
No, fair. Very good. Right, my number 4 is Embereth Veteran, the 1 mana 2/1 in red with upside. Because that is that is all it needs to be a good card. But no, I do think the activatability on this card is going to be good when you want it to be. It'll let you push through some damage with one of your other creatures while also just being a good base body by itself. Also, the fact it's an uncommon means it's going to see a lot of play in Peasant Cubes where they don't have rares, like where they don't have like your Ragavans and your Goblin Rabble Masters, where they're probably still playing Jackal Pup. So yeah, I think Embereth Veteran is going to be a good include and going to see a fair bit of play in a lot of cubes.
Cool. Makes sense. Number 3, I went for the Mosswood Dread Knight. There's no bad thing to say about this card. It's a nice aggressive body. You get a bunch of value on it. You can keep recurring it. It's a nice little engine. I'm in for this.
Nice. Yeah, my number 3 is Sir Ginger the Mealender. This is my list. Like I as we kind of spoke about when we talked about this card, this will not go in every cube, but it's definitely going to go in mine. And it's one I think that's going to be pretty good in the aggressive artifact deck, which is still putting up decent results and has been quite successful. And I think this will be a nice little addition to that deck.
Yeah, I can see it for sure. Number 2, I went for Virtue of Persistence. I like getting a decent removal spell with something that will eventually end the game at 7 mana. I'm pretty in for that. I think the life gain really helps on the removal spell. I've no bad things to say about this card.
Yep, that's a good one. I'll be honest, I forgot about that one. But I'm committing to my list now. Pledge Resistance, very good. Yeah, no, my number 2, I put the Mosswood Dread Knight. At some point, I'm probably just going to have to lean into Golgari just doing really good Golgari things and stop trying to get clever with it. This just sums up what the archetype or what the color player can do just very well. Just grind out value. Maybe this is just what I need to be doing in Golgari at the moment. Just put in good aggressive cards that come back again and again. And Mosswood Dread Knight seems great in that kind of shell.
Yeah, for sure. My number one, I went for the Embereth Veteran.
Let's go!
Yeah, you just don't need a lot of help with 1 mana 2/1s in red, and I think this ability is pretty good, actually. I think it's going to do some work.
Nice. Well, my number one is obviously the card that's better than Oko. Succumb to the cult. No, I'm not going to even keep this up. My number one is Gruff Triplets. I'm definitely higher, nosebleed higher on this card than I think you are. If I'm honest with you, I want to make Sneak Attack great again. I just want to play some Hasty Boys and get value from it. And Gruff Triplets seems really, really good in that. And it's a card I am really looking forward to play. And I think it kind of had to be my number one. Also, it was the first card I added to the pre-order list. So that's probably, I guess, a reason why I should put it as number one.
Nice. Locking it in early.
Yeah, exactly.
Seems good. Yeah, no, I do like the card.
Right, awesome. I think that's going to do it for the episode. James, thank you very much as always for being here. Always a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, no, always good doing the set reviews. And I think we've got some good ones this time.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yeah. Ton of cool cards and some very cool synergistic options. And also, we have a couple of notes to take away. We'll have a chat, see if Boris equipment is there. Maybe that's an episode for the future. But yeah, it just leaves me to thank you all very much for watching and listening. Please like, share, subscribe, give us a 5-star review, tell a friend, all that good stuff. It's all greatly appreciated. But anyway, it is goodbye from me. It's goodbye from James.
Goodbye.
And we'll see you all soon.